Stanford University.
Welcome to EE380. It's the third week of the quarter. Please keep up with the assignments because this is the time when people get behind and never catch up. Next week is Doug Crawford, who will be talking to us about programming languages. Today's speaker, Craig Reynolds, has made numerous contributions to image production. He earned his movie credits when you couldn't buy a petaflop at Fry's and was recognized by the Academy in 1998 when they finally got around to recognizing the folks who had laid the groundwork for Hollywood's digital future. Yes, that Academy. And that was the year of Titanic and many other big movies, so sort of a momentous year in Academy history. Craig Reynolds, though, has talked before 380, the last time he presented Boids, which demonstrated how to make groups, such as crowds of people or birds, or fish, or pretty much any herding animal, move naturally. His demo showed a flock of triangles flying so realistically that one might have thought that he'd rotoscoped triangles over actual birds. However, the cool thing, at least from my point of view, is that he managed to make a funny movie procedurally, which is, they keep talking about the formula for humor. He had it. Today's talk, though, is about camouflage, and with that, I'll disappear.
All right. Well, thanks for the introduction. I think you'd have to have a pretty geeky definition of funny for that film, but I'll accept that. And thanks, Professor Allison, for inviting me to speak here. So this work is a little hard to sell. It's quirky and interdisciplinary, so I hope you'll find something interesting here. I'd like to point out that I'm a neighbor. I work for Sony Computer Entertainment, which is the PlayStation company. We're just up the road in Foster City. Our group is about 80 people these days, I think, and primarily we do development of libraries and tools that are used by game developers, but we have some research work. This is really an outlier from that. It's sort of a gift for me. So the general topic is a very abstract model of the way camouflage evolves in nature, and the major themes of the work involve evolutionary computation, and particularly genetic programming. The textures that are involved in this come from procedural texture synthesis, pure synthesis, where you're making images, textures, just from the mathematics, the procedural definition, without input images. And this is a hybrid system where there's both a computer component and a human being. We'll get into that. There has been a little bit of work on similar topics before, but it was even more abstract than this, if that's possible, intended to involve almost symbolic modeling of the natural system. So I come from the SIGGRAPH community, and I was looking for color and high-resolution images and the sort of complexity that you find in natural imagery. There's a long list of limitations, but chief among them, the fact that it's purely a two-dimensional model, so it's just a texture hack, doesn't involve perspective or shading or any of those kinds of things that common in computer graphics or the natural world. And as I mentioned, it's a hybrid computation, runs very slowly and requires human effort, quite a bit of human effort. So what I'm presenting here is not a really practical technique, sort of a existence proof, maybe. Okay, so here are some examples of results from the system. And I'll first point out what's going on in these images. So at the, I call them thumbnails, at the center there's this circular piece of evolved texture that's 100 pixels across, and then a portion of the background, the environment on which it was found, sort of in the wild, as it were. So the system is driven by the natural image that forms the background, and in this case, so this is tree bark, this is polished stone called serpentine. I believe it's the state rock of California. There you go. Thank you. And it's come under, it's being, they want to dethrone it because it's toxic. It contains some asbestos.
Keep the people away from it.
These are some lantana flowers in my backyard. This is a neighbor's hedge. Except for a few snapshots of my own, most of these pictures are actually Creative Commons images from the web, a lot from Flickr and Wikimedia Commons. So that aspect of modern society made this work much easier, finding images and getting them for free. This one is some kind of sculpture involving wires, and we're seeing them silhouetted against the sky. And this is some lichen on a bench, apparently. And this is kind of in context. So this is kind of what you see on the screen when it's running. There's a background image. This is the serpentine, polished serpentine. And there are 10 evolved textures here. So again, these little circular discs. I'll give you a second to sort it out, but let me point these out. So I think this one is maybe less camouflage than the other. And there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and this one, 9. That's kind of my favorite. Okay, so this is sort of what the results look like. I'm approaching this system as a co-evolutionary model based on the interaction between the camouflage on the prey and the vision of the predator. And it is predation that drives the evolutionary system. The camouflage is intended to disrupt the predator's vision. Now, in nature, the camouflage comes from complicated interaction of a lot of elements, genetic and developmental, and related to mechanical stresses and strains, and Turing textures, reaction diffusion textures all seem to play a part in this. But I'll just generally call that morphogenesis. And that pattern-making mechanism is being driven by evolution. On the other side, the predator has very complicated eyes and brains, and of course an effective predator also has locomotion and whatnot, but again, tuned by evolution. And in the current version of the work that I'll show you the results, we've seen some results today, looks like this, where I'm using procedural texture synthesis from computer graphics under the control of evolutionary computation, which is a sort of nonlinear optimization based on, again, abstractly based on evolution in nature. And the predator side, I left that for later. So in this model, it's just a person looking at the image and making the judgment. There is actually some learning going on there, because there's this idea of search targets that predators and people using the system make use of. I'll talk a little more. I hope eventually to get to this slightly different system where the prey side is as now, but the predator is a procedural system based on machine vision and some sort of self-organization, evolution or learning or other kinds of optimization. Okay, and now one of the things that makes this work unusual is it draws on elements from a lot of different places. So I'm going to do a little National Geographic section here and just try to motivate some of the ideas and refresh your knowledge of camouflage. So this image I like just because it's very cool to find 3 different species within a centimeter of each other. But this is a little like, and there's not a lot of good camouflage going on here, but what I liked about the image was that you have a round object with sharp edges being placed upon a background, and they're, in order to avoid detection, what they need to do is blend in with the background or be harder to see against them. This is maybe a little better representation of the system that I'm modeling. This is a thing called a lanternfly. We're in Madagascar, and this is in the canopy of the forest, so up near the top of the trees. These crazy biologists use like mountain climbing equipment, and they go up into the trees, and they do transects, and they photograph everything every couple of centimeters, and they find all this stuff. I believe this critter is about an inch long. But I want to point out, as expected, the colors on it closely mirror the environment that it's tuned to, which includes things like moss, and there's tree bark and lichen, and we see some greens and yellows, and there's white highlights and black shadows, and you see all these colors reflected in the pattern on the animal's wing covers. But particularly, sorry, I want to draw your attention to the edge of the wing here, the silhouette boundary of the animal, where there are very distinct marks, often moving nearly perpendicular to the edge. And this is referred to as disruptive camouflage. And it's interacting with the low-level edge finders in your vision systems, or say a bird that was going to eat this with its vision system. But if you look, there seem to be places where the background and the edge of the insect line up, and features almost seem to continue from one to the other, because your vision system is trying to connect together these small patches of texture information, make sense out of them. And this disruptive property is very important to make effective camouflage in nature, and you'll see it in some of the synthetic results.
This is a fixed pattern, or does it adapt?
I believe that's fixed. I think they're born with it, and it stays. This is a very nice picture of a caterpillar here. It's the first time I saw it, there's a property of camouflaged images that I tend to think of as sort of spooky. And it's when, even after you see it, you kind of don't see it. So, but the animal here has a stripe along its back that matches the stem in the middle of the leaf, and it also has these little feathery things coming off the side, which disguise its silhouettes and look a little like the veins of the leaf. Just amazing stuff. So a moth on some tree bark, and again you see these features that intersect the edge to provide disruptive camouflage. This is a true bug on tree bark. This is a spider, and he's up here somewhere. Yeah, I don't know exactly. These are sand grains, but there's a lot of variation in that. This is another spider. This is a crab spider. There's several species of this around the world, but this is kind of the way he makes his living. He sits on a flower, looking a lot like the flower. And if you'll notice, 4 of his legs are kind of out and ready to grab at anything that lands in the center of the flower. I guess he's supporting himself on his other 4 legs. But when a bee or other nectar-eating insect flies in, this guy goes, grabs him, and has lunch. And as a result, they do much better when they look a lot like the flower. And so there's quite a few different kinds that look like different sorts of flowers. You can see these little fluorescences here that are mostly white with sort of red divots in the center, and there's little bits of green vein, and the spider reflects these colors. And this is its lunch, by the way. This is another crab spider showing a different sort of coloration. You asked about changes in camouflage. So I think it's better to say that I'm modeling the non-changing kind of camouflage, but for anyone who's ever seen a cuttlefish, is amazing animals. It's biological video. It's video skin. They can change the patterns on their skin instantaneously, in fact, they can animate it. The flamboyant cuttlefish does that a lot. And in between, there are other steps like this is a snowshoe hare, I believe, that changes colors twice a year. The crab spiders that we were just talking about, they slowly adapt to the environment that they're on. They have sacs under their skins that fill with pigments that they produce depending on what they see. And this is a chameleon that you're probably more familiar with. This is a lizard on some granite, I assume. This is a sole on the bottom of the ocean on a sandy bottom. This is a little shrimp, and he's on another creature called a crinoid. Biologists would cringe, but it's this sort of fern-like shaped thing, and it's a little bit in body shape like a sea anemone or something like that. It stays fixed to the rock during its lifetime. But you can see how closely attuned the shrimp is to the coloration, the black and white coloration of the crinoid. Well, it turns out that crinoids have been around for millions of years, and there's been a lot of radiation and speciation, and there's just zillions of varieties of them. You see these yellow and red, and this is like blue and yellow, and in each case there's a shrimp that has particularly evolved for that particular species of crinoid. These are a couple of owls doing a really good job looking like bark. This is another scops owl on an olive tree. And I really like this picture. If it wasn't for the fact that his face is symmetrical, you probably wouldn't notice him at all. This is a frog adapted for muddy, dry leaf kind of environment. This is the same closely related species that lives in greener areas. It's almost as though someone came along and just dabbed on a little green paint on the brown version. This is a European frog. I think this one's interesting because he does a pretty good job of blending in with the gravelly, this is like a walkway. But his coloration is sort of gray and green. The background doesn't have any green in it, but somehow that doesn't matter. He still is pretty effective. This is just a great picture of a very common animal called a gray tree frog. And you can see that while he's adapted to blend into tree bark, does a really good job on this concrete step. These animals also change color during the year. They go from the gray phase to a greener phase. This is a gecko from Madagascar doing a really good job looking like bark. So you can kind of see where he is. This is the head down here and his tail and back legs. And yeah, they're incredibly cryptic. This is all, on the right environment, this one would be very cryptic. I show this picture just because in this environment you can see the little crenellations along the edge of his body that help him do an even better job of blending in with his with the appropriate background. And a nice picture of an acacia tree and a giant giraffe. The guy who took this picture said that they had driven up and they were taking pictures before he realized that there was a giraffe standing there.
Part of the big deal with camouflage, though, is that it's like the guys who are ski troops. It's the instantaneous aspect of camouflage. It's not the fact that given a little bit of time, you see them. I mean, I was driving 108 over Sonora Pass, and there was a bow hunter, next to a tree. It's like, there's a bow hunter next to a tree, but he was completely in camo and everything
Yeah,
as well
yeah.
too. But it's that instantaneous.
That's right,
you
and
do- yes.
and that little bit of delay is what gives the prey the ability to sneak away from the predator,
Yeah.
and it's that differential
Yeah,
that
there's a time
drives.
factor involved there.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't have to be impossible to see. It just has to be a little harder to see than similar creatures.
Harder to see than the tasty thing next to you.
That's it. That's right. You'll never escape that bear. I don't have to. I just have to run faster than you. Yeah. Sorry. So I list here a couple of influences in this work. Early work in co-evolution, in genetic algorithms, pure procedural texture synthesis, starting with Ken Perlin. There's been a lot of work since then improving those procedural noise textures. The idea of using genetic algorithm with a human in the loop probably goes back first to Richard Dawkins in The Blind Watchmaker, and Carl Sims took that work and kind of turned it up to 11 for a SIGGRAPH paper, making very interesting color graphics synthesis from that. Work on reaction diffusion textures, as I mentioned, were kind of inspired by camouflage patterns when Turing published the original work in '52. And Murray did some simulation work, one of which was, or one piece of which is published in Scientific American, and I think that's what led to the next group of papers that were published at SIGGRAPH doing simulations of reaction diffusion textures. I made these slides a couple of months ago, and I'm sad to say that Andy Witkin has recently passed away. We just lost a friend and colleagues in the computer graphics business. He was at Pixar.
Also, Richard Voss, when he was at IBM, when he was doing the early stuff with Mandelbrot, he made some very important comments, like, especially with fractals, said, don't attempt to fool a real geologist with this stuff.
Yeah.
He was about 1985 when he did that particular work.
Yeah, I guess I haven't pointed out, but I am not a biologist, so you should take everything I say with a grain of salt.
I can ask you when you get done. I want to see your crab and granite photo again, just to see if I could tell the difference.
By the way, guys, the inverse, the people in seismic data processing, that's what they give homework problem. Take an image, cut out the circle, and interpolate basically. So if you know the physics, you can
to
do
fill
much
in
better.
the missing part?
Yeah,
Yeah.
although it gives out not just from seismic, it gives them some other things like the sky or whatever, galaxies.
That term, there's
Interpolation, that's very well used in estimation theory, nonlinear. Typically stochastic, nonlinear, blah, 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 Bayesian, throw all these things in it. And they can do a very good job, especially at the boundary, because they do basically log likelihood detection. That's how you find the boundaries in the first place. So whatever they do interpolate, they go back and then try to estimate what the boundaries are. So you can actually do pretty good second order, basically.
and in the field of art restoration, there's a very similar problem when you have a hole punched in a painting and you want to make a patch for it. And so that term in painting is also used in computer graphics, which has become a commercial technique in film production where you need to take something out of the image.
Photoshopping,
Yeah. Well, and it's harder when you're doing it in a movie and you've got thousands of frames to do. And anyway, the study of camouflage, I like old citations, so I think 1895 is a personal best for me. So, this is a screenshot of Dawkins' blind watchmaker application, but it was possibly the first time when a genetic algorithm like computation was done with a human in the loop. This is Carl Sims' work that I mentioned. Very similar concept, but he used color raster images instead of those little line drawings that you saw in the previous frame. And this work by Bond and Camille, probably the work that's closest to what I'm describing here. There's a blue jay looking at his favorite TV show. They they were using a genetic algorithm to evolve patterns on these little moth shapes, and using a noise texture for the background. So I think, yeah, this is the one chosen by the Jays. This is some kind of artificial predator. I think the point of this particular paper, it was a series of papers, but they select for variation and this gets to the idea of a search target. When you start to recognize the particular pattern that's on the moths that you're eating, then you start looking like you have a template in your visual search, and you're trying to find pictures that match. And in psychology, they talk about this idea of pop-out. For instance, in the first picture here, if I ask you to find the red X, that's very easy, or the circle, whereas finding the yellow square here is a little longer, kind of frustratingly harder to find. And similarly, as you add more complexity to the background, it gets harder to find targets. But these are the kind of psychological underpinnings of camouflage detection or camouflage breaking. Okay, so this is a model of the overall system. I used this nice open source library called OpenBeagle that does various kinds of genetic evolutionary computation, and I used its facility for genetic programming. So it maintains a population of programs that are written in this little library that does texture synthesis. These are a bunch of programs written in that library, each of which produce a texture. The other component of an evolutionary computation is a fitness measure, a way of ranking the individuals, and I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean by cohort fitness, but that was implemented using a computer app written in the Mac GUI that ties together the human observer, the predator, the supplied background image, and I'll explain later the eat half strategy, what that means. This, just for concreteness, is the API that the programs were written in, the texture generating programs that each define a prey and its camouflage texture. So there, some of them are generators, just meaning that with a couple of simple, like numeric parameters, they generate a texture pattern. And then there are operators that take textures as input. So for example, adding together two textures. And examples of these would be uniform color, a gradation between two colors, going from black to white or something like that, and other things. This is Perlin noise here. Anyway, I won't talk in detail about those, but to answer a question that I got asked the last time I gave this talk, someone said, were any of those particularly useful in generating camouflage? And it turned out to be this one, which for odd reasons I called rapulence. It's a variation on Ken Perlin's turbulence texture. But the property, when I first came up with it, I thought, oh, well, that's kind of cool, but what does it have to do with anything? But it's a fractal pattern. It has detail at several octaves of scale, and the details are edges. So this gets mixed in various different ways with the procedural textures to give it that property of blending in with the background at different scales. Okay. I don't want to say too much here, except that if you're familiar with genetic algorithms, I was using a steady state population with what's called high elitism, which basically means that instead of making each generation anew, there are a lot of survivors from one generation to the next. In fact, half of the population survived. So it's a little more like a simulated ecosystem, and we're just keeping track of individuals. They stay in the breeding population until the predator takes them out. Okay. If you're not familiar with genetic programming, this slide won't tell you enough to be familiar, but this is the basic idea of crossover in genetic programming. Have a pair of parents, different expressions written in some language here, one-letter function names and integers. You identify a sub-expression in each one, and then so the red part survives down here, and the blue part gets plugged in where this hole was. And by this sort of random cut and paste, sort of syntax-aware cut and paste, it recombines the programs. And what happens is that little snippets of code that turn out to be relevant to the problem increase in frequency in the population, and ones that don't fall out. And the crossovers tend to sort of keep stirring this code base until the right bits get juxtaposed to generate good results. I mentioned that there's a population in genetic algorithm. You're sort of doing a parallel search of a high-dimensional space. It turns out to be good to divide those into subpopulations, so you get, instead of mixing them all together. So I used 4 of these breeding populations, each of which had 30 individuals. And in a little more detail, as I described, there's half are new, half are old. That's what the 2 colors indicate. There's slow migration from one breeding population to the other. And these cohorts that I mentioned that are presented to the user in a batch, those are the 10 out of the 30. That's what those indicate. Okay, so a little closer up, this was the texture that evolved on tree bark. Looks a little like a burl, maybe. It's not quite wood grain, but it did do a good job of blending in with the picture of tree bark. And then on the side there is the source code for it. Now, you'll be forgiven if it doesn't mean much to you, but I'll help a little bit. So the outer operator, for example, is colorize. The first argument is being used to sort of density slice the second argument. Now that second argument looks like this. It's a procedural noise texture. The top part looks like this, and I've drawn this red line here. It's actually the colors along that positive x-axis of the texture space that's used to define the colors in the colorization. And if we dive into this a little more, this is without the outer expression, and here's another noise. So we're essentially colorizing one noise pattern by another. It's a very simple program. Most of them are much bigger than that, but there's the combined effect again. Right, this was one that was generated on the serpentine background. You can see the code's a little bigger. It's still kind of small for typical results in this, but as you can see, it's floating point numbers and these functions from the texture synthesis API. This one actually came from a different fitness function, but I like it a lot. It's a very cool texture. Okay. So when the system is in use, this is sort of the procedure that you go through. You start with a blank screen, you click on that, and it shows you background texture and a cohort of 10 prey textures randomly positioned on it. And then the user's job is to identify 5 times to identify the most conspicuous one and eat it, remove it from the population. So for example, clicks on this one, it goes away, then chooses maybe this one and that one. There's 7 left. Take this one and that one. Okay, and then that's the end of the round. So the 5 that were clicked on are now out of the breeding population. The 5 that weren't clicked on remain in the population. And the ones that are gone now get replaced with newly bred textures. So some statistics, I would run these for at least 1,000 of those little games like I just showed. Although when they were doing something interesting, I couldn't bear to stop and would keep going on. But going by the 1,000 number, so that's 10,000 individuals being fitness tested, which corresponds to about 83 generations in a traditional generational GEA with a population of 120. That's maybe a little on the light side, maybe 100 would be more typical there. But the important thing, the how crazy is he statistic, is it takes 5,000 to 10,000 mouse clicks per run. So for me, I would do that in little batches over a couple of weeks. If I had a grad student that I could hold a gun to his head, then maybe it would be about 3 hours of work, just constant clicking, but then, they'd be dead.
This sounds like the perfect thing for Mechanical Turk.
That's a good idea. Yes, exactly. And I wanted to make this point. Late in the run, you have a lot of the camouflage prey start to look a lot like the background, but early on, it's often hard to do some ranking. So, one of these is the right color, one has kind of a suggestion of some aspect of the spatial frequencies in the texture, and it's hard to know which of those is the better one to take out. And I assume that what happens early in the run has a big impact on the way the rest of the run happens, kind of biasing things. So we saw some of these earlier. Again, these are on the serpentine, the polished stone background. In each case, there's a circle of evolved camouflage in the center. And then this is the image we saw before with them in context. These are the lantana. I think I actually like this one the best, although I ran the simulation some more. But particularly, something to notice in all of these is that it's doing a good job if you have a hard time seeing right where the boundary of the circle is. So they're all the same size, they're all circles, you know exactly what you're looking for. But in the best results...
cheating? Shouldn't you have a random boundary?
Well, I guess you can define cheating how you want, but yeah, so I considered
it's
variations.
Even though it's
Well, I think
texture inside, but it's round.
the argument that I would use is that if this is successful, that's the harder case because you know what the shape is. And in
Games.
thank you. In the natural world, the predator gets to learn those things, so it varies. But I did think about the idea of having some kind of definition of the transition at the boundary, or like the gecko with the little crenellations around the outside, or maybe like a soft blend of the. And I thought, well, no, a soft blend. That's just a computer graphics hack. You know, it has nothing to do. And then I found these bugs. I won't get off track and show you the picture, but there's types of beetles that essentially have a clear carapace with opaque colors dabbed on it. So you can in fact see some of the background through the edge of their body.
Blending,
Yeah, yeah. It's
Well, you know, you're like, I was actually throwing a rock for my friend Hal over here. It's not serpentine, it's not quite serpentine. The big thing here actually is you're doing this all in 2D, and it turns out the reality. I was actually going to bring you for the class a book on aerial camouflage as an example. It's very serious stuff. And one of the big things is the fact that it turns out during World War II, Hollywood was involved in the camouflage, for instance, the McDonnell Douglas plant or Douglas aircraft plant in Santa Monica. But the military guys go, you know, the problem is that fact that most people don't know what the ground looks like from the air. Turns out most of our disambiguation of stuff is because we use stereo. And stereo adds a lot of cues. Now, there's other things too. You can also do the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So infrared, for instance, was used heavily because, hey, tanks emit heat, as an example. Well, it turns out the first Gulf Crusade in '91, the Iraqis knew this. So one of the things they did was they put smoke pots, which burned oil and stuff, thinking, okay, they're going to think these tanks have already been hit. Well, that worked only to a period of time, enough for the Americans to realize. Now, just simply shoot every tank that's there. You could always throw in an additional
That's right.
sabot into a tank, that doesn't cost that much. And, that killed, of course, thousands of, or many hundreds of Iraqi tank crews, as an example. So.
And in general, I certainly agree with the idea that this is a very simple abstract model, and there's a lot of ways to go with it
Simple is good, because it's, cheat is really important. It's Blind's cheat teaming thing, But the thing is also to know how camouflage is defeated as well too. I mean, there's a nova on the top of camouflage as well too. For novices, they did that to battleships in World War I as an example. It turned out actually a lot of stuff worked.
Yeah.
The nature of humans.
Yeah, there are a lot of surprising things in effective camouflage, like military camouflage, like putting little light sources on the edges of.
A light directly at a person, as you get closer and closer, is enough to be able for them to get close enough to lob a bomb at you, as an example. And observers. And all kinds of stuff of that nature. But 2D is fine. Or drawing shapes of planes on grounds are enough. You could actually find those on Google Earth if you know where to look. Where they developed anti-airfield munitions were developed that way, and they left those fake airfields out in the middle of Utah, and you can find them, you can see them. You never have planes that close, as an example. So how do you tell it's a fake airfield?
Touch noses and
Yeah.
So here's the flowers with cohort on them. The yellow lichen, some of these down here. I didn't mention, but maybe it was obvious that these are time series. And in fact, there's more detailed versions of these on the project page for this, which is linked from the EE380.
over to a later generation.
Yes. So this is early in the run, and this is late in the run. That's right. Here we are. I think these are pretty effective. It turned out, so I guess one thing I should note is that because I'm both designing the experiment and being the experimental subject, there's certainly an issue of experimenter bias in these. And during this run, one of the things early on, there were patterns like this that had yellow dots. Geez, that really looks a lot like the background, and I probably was helping them survive. But later on, what actually, we have one of these? There was sort of a olive green color, I guess like these, that was more effective than those yellow spots, even though it's a color that doesn't occur in the background. I don't know if you can quite see the difference, but these spots here are more green than the background. It's a little like the toad that blended in with the concrete, even though he was the wrong color.
Have you tried to run an experiment as to how sensitive this is to the particular selection of things to evolve? Because
The answer is no, but why don't you go on?
okay. Because it seems to me that it would be interesting to take several examples and work them out, and at each stage try to build out the whole tree. That is, you choose a set of 5, choose a slightly different set of 5, another slightly different set of 5, and see if you eventually evolve back to the same thing.
Distribution.
Yeah. I
Genetic
think,
algorithms guys say, yeah, you will, but it may not be.
well, when you have human in the loop, there's always issues of subjectivity and repeatability. But I think in general, the idea of looking at how repeatable this is and how I showed the slide with the 2 very different textures, neither of which really looked like the background. You might run an experiment where, again, assuming graduate students or Mechanical Turk or something like that, you might say, try to match the color first and then go for texturing of the color, or you might tell them the opposite. You might give them some additional instructions and see if that leads to different results. And just seeing if you run the same patterns with different people or multiple times, if you get similar results.
You can also do time-based where you just say, hit as many as you can in 4 seconds.
Yes.
Initially, you hit.
I should have talked to you when I was writing the paper, but that's there. The mechanical Turk thing is mentioned there. Yeah. So having time pressure gets back to the
First
point, right. That having the fact that the predator is under some time pressure will change. So I didn't have a limit on me when I was doing this, and so sometimes I was sitting there scratching my chin trying to decide, which was the better camouflage, which is really not what happens in nature. The predator is usually making a quick decision.
Speaking of credits, there's Brian Flax, he's known around here. His thesis show that if you evolve distributions, you actually can show global convergence. I mean, just making sub-selections, not whole distributions, you penalize yourself. That you get trapped in some ballpark, basically, you never get out. That's the curse of neural networks. But if you work with distributions right from the beginning and evolve the distributions, that works. They can even show us as a global convergence, so you might actually get your texture.
Yeah.
When you play this game, the prey get placed randomly in a new spot every time. Is that right?
Yes. Or that's actually the way it's supposed to work. I think I've seen a bug where sometimes I'll see the same distribution, and I think I maybe don't have a thread-safe random number generator or something, but that's the way it's supposed to work. Again, you can see kind of a refinement over time from this rather bad approximation to this pretty good one. Oh, and I wanted to point out in here, I'm from the graphics community, and there's a lot of cheap tricks that are used in graphics, and drop shadows is one of them. I mean, you might have seen on the slides, some of the text has drop shadows. This is kind of a cliche. But this background is a bunch of brightly lit leaves, which have shadows. Yeah, they shadow each other. And somewhere early in this run, there were some patterns like this, which basically just a bunch of disks, but some white, some black, and through the recombination in genetic programming, you get things where you sort of have a copy of one element that's modified a little bit. So I think what was happening is you'd get a pattern of spots that would be green and the same pattern of spots but a darker color subtracted from the background. So particularly here, you can see them very clearly. But in these, this has kind of subtle drop shadows under some of these disks. So it's, it seems very much a chance occurrence, but it certainly seemed to work well. Here's the whole group. Oh, and so one negative example. What I saw, one of the things I observed was that because of
infected.
yes, really bad peppers, right? Don't buy these. Because there was a fixed size and a set size for the evolved textures, they couldn't represent something that was bigger than themselves. So the features in this background are too large. There's black areas, and then there's big areas of yellow and orange and red and some green. And it tried really hard. It came up with a lot. And the ones that look best in this run are sort of accidental alignments. So like this one that is red with a black edge on it, it worked in that particular one. It even has some green here near the stem. It worked okay there, but anywhere else in the image would not have been effective. So this is what it looks like when it can't quite solve the system. This is the cohort. Okay, so let me just finish up, and as we said, has been touched on a couple of times. So yeah, it would be interesting to be able to do more of these, if nothing else, than to look at some of those comparisons. One way to do it is buying people's time, sort of imposing on people in the third world, basically, to do the human part of the hybrid system. There's also this idea from Louis Van Ahn and his colleagues at CMU called Games with a Purpose. You probably have seen the Google Image Labeler game, and also things like CAPTCHA and reCAPTCHA came out of that group. So the difference there is that instead of paying people to play your games, you make them a little more game-like, and you give them scores, you have leaderboards, you pair people, two people head-to-head live across the web, and people will play these games just for fun. They become like casual games. The next thing, the next substantive thing that I'd like to do is to work on this machine vision-based predator. Possibly, as I note there, saliency seems like a good technique for finding areas in the image that might be prey, and then perhaps taking that neighborhood and trying to classify it as prey or background or something on background. Maybe like a support vector machine or something like that. Doing some other work about using these evolutionary texture synthesis tools for other kinds of applications. And I haven't collaborated with any biologists on this work, it's probably obvious, but I think there's room in synthetic biology, theoretical biology, for using a tool like this to do some simulation studies. For example, there are these people biologists who work with birds that eat moths, so avian insectivores. And the moths are very cryptic. They rest during the day on the bark of the tree, and the birds fly around and find them and eat them. So they've done a lot of very cool work by making fake moths. They print the wing patterns on a color printer, glue it onto a piece of cardboard, and tack it up to a tree. They put a little mealworm in the center, like the body of the moth, and then they come back every few hours to see if the mealworms have disappeared. And so, for example, they've been able to quantify the disadvantage that a moth gets from having a symmetrical camouflage pattern. So the pattern on the two wings are the same. Which, like that owl's face that I showed earlier, that's a cue that Predator uses. But being able to do simulation studies like that may be of use in biology. Also, I think this could probably be a tool for classroom instruction about biological evolution.
I have a question about that. The camouflage obviously needs to be tuned to the vision of the predator.
Right.
And birds have different vision. They have 4 colors, I believe.
That's right.
So how are you dealing with that, or how are they going to? That's one question. And then I recall published reports from during World War II claiming that people who were colorblind were better at spotting camouflage than people with normal vision. I don't know if that was true or not, but it was published. So if you're going to be running tests with human subjects, you probably ought to at least run some tests on them to calibrate their vision in advance.
Yeah, and you can also simulate some of those effects by say, taking a luminance filter over the image that you would otherwise, the color image that you would otherwise present, and so essentially make normal-sighted people colorblind. You could test things like that. And yes, so very true that birds have different kind of color perception. They have better color perception than we do. So I'm not doing anything at all about that. The picture that I showed earlier of the bird looking at the color monitor, he was probably thinking the same thing. There's only 3 colors here.
By the way, there are a few humans have 4 colors.
Yes, yeah, mostly females, right?
Yep.
No,
Only
I
females.
know a male.
Okay.
Really? I heard it was only female.
That's what I'd heard, that it was sex-linked. But you,
That's a guy.
okay.
Okay.
Might be a rule.
The reason why during World War II, one of the other things B.F. Skinner was employed is he put pigeons inside of guided bombs. And the pigeons were actually more accurate guiding the bomb in than the bombardiers and planes, because they could guide it to target, as an example. But they didn't like the idea for the Audubon Society that we were blowing these pigeons up. But the cruise missile actually came out of, and the walleye bomb came out of Skinner's work, which was, of course, classified during World War II. But, yeah, no, I mean, there's lots of this stuff. And to this day, in fact, it's not just pigeons. I mean, the Navy uses seal, dolphins, and small pilot whales to do stuff.
Japanese use humans.
Yeah, the Japanese use humans, too, for that matter.
So do the Afghans.
So I'll just get in some thanks. Working in industry, I don't deal with NSF, but I'm very indebted to my employer and my boss for sponsoring this work, basically letting me go off in this unusual direction. And my remote collaborator, Björn Camouflage in Germany, we've worked on a couple of open source projects, and he actually jumped in when I was despairing of meeting a paper submission deadline. He jumped in and wrote the little app that's the user interface for this, and several other people who were helpful in this. I'm sorry, John, you were going to ask something?
Yeah, you have this genetic algorithm that uses a number of generator functions, each of which has some parameters, which is fairly typical. There's two parts of it, tuning the parameters and picking the functions.
Right.
And that raises some interesting questions as to, do some of those functions tend to be thrown out in practice because they just never really get used very much?
Well, I don't know the answer to that because I haven't done the statistics on the prevalence in the population of the different elements of the language. I have noticed, I mentioned that there's this one particular pattern that shows up a lot. So I think it has kind of a special role. But there are patterns that I don't remember seeing very often, or when they did show up, they seemed kind of obvious and not very suited for camouflage.
What I think would be really interesting here is if you tried it with a large number of people, but each person went through the whole process by themselves. That it's not. So I wonder, does everybody pick the same patterns? You may be able to learn something about how human vision works by discovering that some people recognize against certain confusion operators better than others.
Yeah, that's right. I had thought in terms of basically getting a bunch of people over the web to work on the same experiment, but I think what you're proposing is interesting, is to compare different individuals.
Yeah, I don't think everybody's going to be the same on this.
No.
But that's not necessarily a problem, the same way that different predators are probably not
Well, it's not
identical.
that it's a problem. The point is that you learn something about how human vision works by seeing who tends to converge on which kinds of confusion functions.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Well, since you had mentioned about the whole games with the purpose, and now like he was mentioning about looking for how the human vision works and which ones they pick out more often. This is somewhat of an aside, but a lot of on Flash games online nowadays, a pretty popular one are spotting differences. So I think it'd be kind of interesting if you had one version which was the original one, and then you had a second one which is the background but with your generated ones on top, and then one you would be able to see the order in which people found the differences. Like, is there some are there particular ones people spot more quickly early on, as well as if they can find all the differences as a whole between an original pattern and an original background with your pattern on top of it.
Yeah, that's a good variation. I should mention that early on I had the human user ranking the 10 samples, and not only was that difficult sometimes to do that whole ranking in some reasonable order, but I also found that it led to this problem where there would be a good result, but it didn't persist in the population. So I switched to this high elitism approach, and basically letting the user, the predator, pick the worst ones and let the other ones drift. And I think that seemed to make it all work better.
You have not only do you do crossover, you do mutation as well?
Yes, yeah. So there's several different genetic operators that are common in genetic programming. I think the key one here, because I was using the floating point values, was a jiggle point mutation. So it just picks out a constant in a program and moves it a few percentages one way or the other. You get a lot of mixing of these tree-structured genomes through this crossover operation. It's very destructive, and so you get some crossover results that are really bad, and but it will quickly move around the space. Sometimes genetic algorithms are discussed in terms of a fitness landscape. There's hills of fitness, and the kind of incremental approaches and mutation approaches tend to help you climb up a hill, but if you're stuck on the wrong little sub-hill, foothill, you need these big jumps that come from the crossover to get to other parts of the space.
By the way, elitism is one of those holes too. I mean, just because both parents are good doesn't guarantee their offsprings are good.
Oh yeah.
It's actually, that's an example where distributions are better. One being good and the other one mediocre is actually generally better because you cover a larger space.
Huh.
Search space is larger. Whereas if you only go for good, then you narrow down artificially your search space. So you might get trapped.
Yeah, and
that's where this distribution argument comes in. You need some of the others to avoid the gaps.
And this negative selection that was used in here, so it essentially gets rid of the worst half in each little cohort, that left a lot of ambiguity about which ones were the best. So I didn't assign continuous fitness to everyone. It was just they either survived or didn't. And see, sorry.
I don't think that you're going to get very much money from the National Science Foundation from either biology, but let me tell you this, I mean, DARPA will certainly give you money. No, DARPA specifically, because it turns out, I think the DoD just did a change of uniform camouflage.
They did.
And what you should do, you're in a unique position. What you should do is actually you should contact the US Army in Natick, Massachusetts.
I've heard of that lab, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll, you talk to them, offer them this talk, because they're the pros, right? And you guys will both benefit.
Well, a lot of people have, when they've seen this work, have asked about military applications, and I assume that those guys in Natick, the people that design military camouflage, know a lot more about this than I do.
It's not so much that, but the thing is that they're also inspired by you guys. I can tell you that. Just talking with
PlayStation or which guys? Which dog are you in?
I'm sure that they can afford to buy all computer gaming systems out there, because they started actually attending gaming conferences, and they initially snicker at first, and then they also see some of the creativity that goes along. So, like I said, you're in a unique position. I would say, send an email to Natick right now, and you'll probably get a nice surreptitious invitation to come. Most of this stuff they'll show you won't be classified or anything like that, because they have to be able to reproduce it with their vendors. But they'll show you a few other things as well too. Like there's a classic one actually. There's a Marine helmet actually. You look at it in visible light. You look at it in infrared. It has the Marine logo that only you see only in the infrared. There's all kinds of stuff like this.
That's why multispectral is.
Yeah, multispectral stereo is done to disambiguate.
Well,
and all kinds of things. It's real fun.
People that do that work, you have to believe they're very motivated to get it right. They're trying to protect the lives of the soldiers.
And live in the Bay Area. Actually, I found out that 1/6 of the entire membership of the Electronic Warfare Association of pros lives in the Bay Area. They're all very quiet.
They're all retired here.
No, not entirely. No, I mean they work for like Lockheed and does anybody know what Steve Wozniak's father did when he worked at Lockheed, as an example? is he an Association of Old Crows member? And they hold meetings here on campus, actually. I've attended one. They had a fantastic presentation, which they ran out of time for, on the history of electronic warfare, as an example. So, yeah,
Okay.
talk to the pros.
Yes.
If you're really interested in camouflage, you didn't sample the whole spectrum you described in the beginning in terms of time change. What you would really discussing was stationary camouflage, not
That's right.
adaptive camouflage. If you're going to do adaptive camouflage, you'd be sampling the background and using that as one of your starting points, and then you'd be kind of, maybe exploring translation invariance of the resulting.
right. Well, as I'm sure you know, when you're trying to set up a research project, you spend a lot of time slicing, okay, I'm not going to think about that issue or this issue, but I think that stuff is very interesting. Without reservation, I'd say that the cuttlefish is my favorite animal, and I'm really interested in how that stuff works, but I chose to limit it to ignore that issue for now.
There are varying degrees of time scale here. There was a wonderful article in Nature a few weeks ago about a fish which, when put in a environment where there are vertical black and white bars, becomes vertically black and white striped. And a couple weeks later, if you change the bar thing, there's enough of a evolutionary factor in its environment, that is, enough of them get eaten, that the bars turn out to be horizontal very quickly. And it's just a few generations, it's not 80. So, evolution is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
At the level of generation.
And so there are, so that's probably not an evolutionary change at that time scale, but it's an evolutionary mechanism that's responding to maybe perception of the animal or other aspects. And there's epigenetics that acts on inheritance. It's almost a Lamarckian mechanism.
Most year, the pepper is sort of an extreme example. The images seem to be most successful ones where there's sort of a variant of a rotation and some other things. And going back to your caterpillar would have been very obvious to people that turn. I don't know if birds understand how leaves look, so I don't know if a bird would have been fooled by the caterpillar turn. But what happens when you try to deal with things that are orientation?
So I actually had a bullet for that on my limitation slide that I don't look at that. There are models in nature of both of them. I mentioned the moths on the tree trunks. They almost always rest head up. The geckos are almost always head down. So they sort of have a preferred orientation, which would allow them, for example, to mimic vertical stripes or horizontal or something like that.
Zebras, turn sideways zebras really obvious.
Yeah, zebras don't make much sense at all. They certainly don't look like the background.
Yes. There's a pinstripe suit going the wrong way. You just instantly see it.
Yeah.
You see them now, so I mean.
I've heard speculation that the thing with zebras might be that when a lion is chasing a bunch of them, the confusion develops because of all these high contrast patterns right next to each other. But I don't know. Yes.
Color blindness was mentioned a while ago. If I'm born without the magic gene, is my brain processing significantly different than it would be if I learned how to see with that gene?
Jeez, you're really asking the wrong guy. I don't know. It's an interesting question, but
Would you get the right answer if you faked the color blindness on the computer screen as far as training?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, I was just saying that you could remove so there. I showed an example of a toad that was green and gray, but he blended into a sort of monochrome background, and I think there's some issues of sort of confusion in the color space, where you're looking at hue differences, but you're reading them as intensity differences, things like that. So I certainly don't know the answer, but I think you could probably get different results by doing the same thing in monochrome than doing it in color. But yeah, this psychology is really way outside my field. Yes?
I think, well, at Monterey Bay Aquarium, they have an exhibit about fish schooling together, and they made the argument that you have a bunch of fish, and so long as you can't single anyone out, it's very difficult to go and kind of grab it. So with the fish, they all kind of look the same, and they're mixing in between each other, which is why it's kind of hard for a predator to go out and grab it.
Yeah, and that's sort of the argument that I've heard about zebras. I've also seen pictures of zebras in like high grass or tree thickets, bush thickets, where it is kind of high contrast, black and white, and so yeah, it's a very unusual kind of camouflage.
There have been a couple of articles about makeup, which confuses facial recognition.
Yeah, I saw that.
Algorithms. And, basically, they're very high contrast things, but they break up the pattern that is recognized to find round faces, basically. And we don't know quite how lions perceive zebras, but it might have something to do with that. It doesn't look like an animal, perhaps.
You got to imagine that an adult lion that's been living next to zebras all its life, he probably understands that it's an animal.
I don't know. Stranger things.
By the way, if you look at some of the movies that just some recently on TV, predators tend to go not for the prey in the middle of the crowd, but on the periphery. Mm-hmm. Maybe a single one outside, and that's probably because the recognition gets simpler, and you're circling a different.
Well, if you're chasing it and you're running, you're gonna try to catch the slowest one you can.
I don't know. That's often that on the younger stuff. Sure, that's part of it, but still, you never see one running into the big crowd. Or very seldom. Not in the big clump of animals.
There's a dolphin hunting pattern where they round them up and they die.
Yeah, but that's different. That's shaping the prey.
I think it's unsafe for the lion to hunt in the middle of the pack.
Well, it depends on the animal. Yes.
It will get hurt.
Well, some preys are passive. They just watch the predator go after. Other preys go after them. After the predator, basically. But it depends on the dynamics.
So I don't want to cut anybody off, but if we've sort of come to a natural stopping point, this is about the right place. So thank you for your attention.
Cool. It's too bad that they didn't use pigeons instead of blue jays, because then it would have been.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.